आपको मनरेगा कमिट करके दिया था, हमने करके दिखा दिया। अब हम आपको न्याय कमिट कर रहे हैं, हम गरीबी को हिंदुस्तान से मिटा देंगे।
On the debate tonight, a massive pre-poll promise from the Congress party. Rahul Gandhi announces a Gareebi Hatao 2.0, claims that if the Congress comes to power, the party will ensure India's poorest get at least 12,000 rupees each month.
तो कांग्रेस पार्टी गारंटी करती है कि हिंदुस्तान के 20% सबसे गरीब परिवारों को, शौक मत होना, अभी धमाका बजने जा रहा है, 20% सबसे गरीब परिवारों को हर साल 72,000 रुपए देने जा रही है।
While the detailed math is unclear, the party says the money will be directly transferred into the account of the women of the house to empower the family and will benefit 5 crore families.
What we are planning to do is ensure that a minimal threshold level of 12,000 rupees a month should be, every family in India should be entitled to it. And those who are not, the government would step in there and ensure that they get that kind of money.
Meanwhile, the BJP hit out, saying Rahul Gandhi's pre-poll announcement is merely a poll gimmick.
गरीबी और गरीबी हटाने के नाम पर राजनीतिक व्यवसाय करने का रहा है, योजनाओं के नाम पर छल कपट रहा है।
No one can stop you from showing a false dream to the people of India, but they are not going to believe the inclusive development of the Modi government for the poor, schemes like Ujjwala Yojana for the farmers, for inclusive digital development, this Ayushman Bharat for the poor, all are game-changing exercise.
While the pre-poll promise aimed to woo the poorest of the poor sounds promising, Mirror now has a few basic questions for Mr. Gandhi. How will the Congress's NYAY scheme identify the poor? How will the scheme verify proof of income? How will the scheme assess individuals with varying income? What will the NYAY scheme cost the exchequer? Will the Congress do away with other pro-poor subsidies? Can India afford Congress's NYAY scheme? And how will the Congress ensure the scheme is corruption-free?
Well, it's very simple questions we're asking, and these are the same questions we asked the BJP when the BJP announced that it would put 6,000 rupees a year in the bank accounts of all farmers. How will you make sure it gets done? On the show with me, right on top, Mr. Salman Khurshid, former Law Minister, External Affairs Minister, senior Congress leader, who's also contesting the upcoming polls. Mr. Khurshid, good evening, and thank you for joining us. A couple of questions about how this plan will actually play out. Rahul Gandhi was not very clear. He, in fact, said your question should go to Mr. Chidambaram. Mr. Chidambaram has been unavailable to answer those questions, but I hope that you'd be able to help us understand. My first question to you is this. How will the Congress, when it comes to power, if it comes to power and has to bring in this plan, what is the plan really to assess income? Because if you're talking about the poorest of the country, people who work on daily wage, they may or may not get work. Their income differs from day to day, from month to month, and they have no proof of the income they have made. How will you assess whether someone makes less than 12,000 rupees a month or no?
Well, that's quite simple. I mean, I'm not in the loop about the details of this decision. This decision is a far-reaching decision. I would want to say that this is a decision of great courage and great foresight and great sensitivity. But the details of how you would pan it out, the details of how you would ensure that it works effectively, are all details will obviously have to be worked out. Some of the broad parameters have been discussed, have been considered. Minds which are outstanding economic minds have pitched in and given us inputs that they could have, and I'm certainly clear that Mr. Chidambaram will have a lot more to say than I can at this moment. But I can assure you that this is something which very seriously had to be done. You cannot just wish away and cannot look away from abject poverty in our country. There are many ways of addressing poverty. This is one extremely significant and courageous way of addressing poverty, and I hope and I believe that people will support it, and we will then be accountable for what we've said, and we will deliver.
Mr. Khurshid, does the Congress party have an assessment of what this would cost us as a country and whether or not we can afford it?
Oh, certainly. Now, the question of whether you can afford something is a matter of your ideological commitment, your human commitment. You might say that giving free medicine is very expensive and you can't afford it. You might say that health insurance for agriculture, you might say that food for all. These are things that are not possible for a country at the cusp of being a developed country, but which has many dimensions of underdevelopment in it, cannot provide. But then you will never break out of the poverty syndrome. We have to break out of it. We've attempted other things in the past, and I do believe that Mr. Rahul Gandhi did speak of Manrega, which was at that time an outstanding, far-reaching, impactful scheme. Now we want to move beyond. Now there may be implications that will have to be considered as we go along. It's something that we will learn from. It is something that we may discover impediments that we will have to overcome. But we are very clear that this has to be done, and it will be done.
Well, let me ask you this. Does this promise include retired people, people with no income, people with no pension? Let's assume I'm unemployed. Would the government then give me the full 12,000 rupees every month that you believe everybody needs to have in order to live with dignity? How is this? And I don't believe the question is, Mr. Chidambaram has just tweeted saying, are you for it or against it? Are you with us? Do you support it or oppose it? The question is, isn't it unfair to expect people to support or oppose without the details? We don't know how this is going to be implemented. We don't know how you are going to identify the people who deserve it and how the money is going to reach their bank accounts. How do we support it without the information, Mr. Khurshid?
Absolutely. Absolutely. See, absolutely, you're right, and more information is going to come. Please don't forget that our manifesto hasn't yet been issued. Please don't forget that we are going to branch off into the entire country. We will span out into the entire country, and we will bring more details out. People will be specifically briefed. They will be given details. They'll be told to go out to the country and tell people. And we will be asked questions as we go forward. You're asking us questions today when it's just been announced, and I'm sure there'll be more questions as we go along. There will be experts, there will be people who are skeptical about what we are trying to do, and they will ask us questions. We will be fully prepared. We will answer those questions. We do realize this is election time, and we do realize at election time you must not mislead people, and therefore we will not. We will give them as much information as we readily can at this moment, but before a scheme is finally implemented when you're in government, a lot of other things need to be done, and they will be done. But the broad parameters of how we will achieve it, how we will ensure that this is not a pipe dream, is something that we will definitely tell the electorate.
Mr. Khurshid, back of the envelope calculation, Mr. Rahul Gandhi announced that this money would reach at least 5 crore families, and they would get up to 72,000 rupees per year per family. Now, this would mean a total expenditure of 3,60,000 crore rupees at the upper end. Do we know where this money would come from?
Well, where does money come for anything? I mean, the money does come from the exchequer, which is then funded by income tax, which is funded by indirect taxes, which is funded by export cess, etc. So all that has to be presented in a budget. If you need the money, you've got to show it. If we were able and we weren't because we didn't have time. If we were able to implement the food security, there would have been a larger amount than this required. We would have still done it. So we do a huge amount. We went all the way up to 72,000 lakh crores as far as Manrega was concerned, but we did it. Nobody could have imagined that something of that size could have been implemented. There were glitches. There were places where things were a little spotty, but I believe it was an outstanding program. And if we had stayed in government, we would have gone much further with it.
Mr. Khurshid, it is fair at this point to say that India's fiscal deficit perhaps cannot afford a scheme of this nature without giving up perhaps spending on other things. My question to you is this: will the government, or will you in government, while implementing this plan, withdraw other subsidies from the poor in order to make this possible? Or will you have to withdraw other programs in order to make this possible? Because the money has to come from somewhere. It's not an unending supply of money.
I know that's very fair. And I think it will be uncharitable for you to ask me today, will you do a cut here, will you do a cut there? We've also made commitments that the 6% of the GDP that we're going to provide for education is a commitment that will remain, and therefore that 6% will not be touched. But there are many areas where hopefully we can tighten the belt, where we can squeeze the money out. There's hopefully ways in which we can raise more money. And ultimately, to say that there isn't money in the country would be wrong. We've gone through a very horrific exercise of demonetization in which everybody assumed that money was limited to a certain extent. But the money that finally flowed back into the banking system was much larger, much greater than what people had suggested or people had imagined. So there is
Mr. Khurshid, forgive me for interrupting you. I have one very quick question.
System. Let's work out the sums.
Forgive me for interrupting you. You did say it was uncharitable of me at this point to ask you where the money is going to come from and where the cuts will be made. You have promised 6% spending on education. You've criticized the current, and by you I mean the Congress party, you've criticized the current government's lack of spending, according to you, on health, the government's cuts on defense. You've said that there will be no cut on other subsidy programs available for the poor, and that this plan will be in addition to that. So isn't it being far too charitable of the Congress party to make a promise at this point when you don't know how you can fulfill it or whether it is possible to fulfill because you haven't seen all of the numbers?
I didn't say that we wouldn't be able to fulfill it. We wouldn't have made this promise if we weren't going to fulfill it. We've done broad sums. Now, I am saying that when you do broad sums, it's the experts who sit in and do it. Not all of us sit in that place. It's not like Parliament sitting around and taking a decision. But whatever has been finally worked out, the formulas that have been worked out, the contours of this scheme will be told to those of us who are going to go out to the country and explain. And we will explain. I mean, this is really an impromptu response immediately after the announcement has been made. But I can assure you, it wasn't made as a wild, pipe dream that was given to the country. It's certainly nothing like what was promised by the present government. 15 lakhs in your accounts, all the black money coming back. This is not that kind of a wild scheme. This is a very well thought out, remarkable social welfare scheme. Things of this kind have been attempted in places like Brazil. We are not the first country to be doing it. But I accept that this is a tough call. I accept that this is not going to be easy. But then, when the chips are down, you stand up and be counted and say, we will deliver, we will do it, and we will take whatever it takes to deliver. We will do whatever it takes to deliver. So please trust us.
All right, Mr. Khurshid, many thanks for giving us time. But you must allow me here as a journalist. I never give in when a politician says, please trust us. I will continue to ask questions, and we will continue to ask tough questions. And
well, we might change your mind. We might change your mind.
You are very welcome to try, Mr. Khurshid. Thank you for joining us on the show. Let me open this up to our panel of analysts at this point. Bharat Kumar Raut, senior journalist, Zafar Islam for the BJP, Charan Singh Sapra for the Congress, Yogendra Yadav will join us as well. Mohan Guruswamy is our senior economist on the panel, and CM Vasudev is the former finance secretary. I will go to the economists first. Mr. Guruswamy, I saw you smile when I was having that conversation with Mr. Khurshid. He said very vague things about how they will identify these people, how they will actually make sure that the poor get the money and where the money is going to come from. So as far as I'm concerned, zero detailing there. And as a result, we can't assess this program. This is an empty promise. Mr. Guruswamy.
You know, Salman spent many years in the foreign ministry, and it shows. He said a lot without saying anything. The fact is that, you know, the 2017 economic survey of the BJP government had universal basic income as a recommendation in it. And this is not a universal basic income. This is a identified basic income for a certain class of people. And as far as BPL is concerned, the government has enough identification of people who are below the BPL, because there are ration cards, there are yellow cards, and you know the NSSO collects data. So there's very good identification of people who fall below the poverty line. Now that shouldn't be much of a problem. There would be some leakages here and there, but that can be sorted out. And you know, with these new databases we've got on Aadhaar and the bank accounts and all, this can be easily sent down the line without much leakage. Unlike Manrega, which is a huge boondoggle, you know, lots of leakages take place, and all local level politicians are helping themselves with it. But this could be much more safer.
No, but
and which also, as to where you're going to get the money, every responsible political party ought to do a ways and means exercise. If you're going to spend some money, where are we going to get it? Salman should say, you know, we're going to increase taxes, because already the rich in this country are among the lowest taxed people in the world, and that is evidenced. And you know, we have a huge income inequality built up, despite this, of 67.
Yes.
Now,
let me just open this up,
today,
Mr. Guruswamy. I just want to allow everybody an opportunity to speak.
Rich have to pay the dues.
Yes. Bharat Kumar Raut. And I'm getting messages from my audience saying, why should hard taxpayer money be used to distribute in this manner? This sounds communist almost. These are freebies. You have to teach a man to fish instead of handing him a fish every day. So what is your reaction to this? Is it another jumla?
In first place, I'm not getting into the reaction part. Let me first put it. This is a very, very poetic thought. Very, very romantic thought. To give 72,000 to 5 crore people in a year is a very, very romantic thought. I don't think it is a practical thing. It is going to be a non-starter. I'm not an economist. However, the simple calculations show, as we were discussing, 3.60 lakh crores will be spent on this. I was just looking at the India's financial annual outlay.
Yes.
And that comes to 5.97 lakh crores. So out of 5.9 lakh crore financial outlay per annum, we are spending we intend to spend 3.6 lakh on this scheme. Then only 2.37 lakh crore they remain for the entire nation building or the spending of the nation. How do you do this, and what happens to the other schemes running of the nation day in and day out for 5 years? I am not saying that Congress, if it comes to power, will be able to do it in year 1. No, but even if it does it year 2, year 3, year 4, is it possible? After saying this, should it be so? Should we promise people to pay for their poverty?
Yes.
Does this mean that we want people to remain poor? Is this going to encourage them or empower them to come out of poverty, or you always wanted to give the crutches from the government to so that they remain poor and so that they remain your slaves? What does the government want? It is a very serious question. Or is it a chunavi jumla?
Well, I must point out that the total outlay is about 21.47 lakh crore, out of which we're talking about 3.6. So it is a large chunk of, that's the total outlay of the National Union budget. Let me just bring in Mr. C.M. Vasudev as well. Mr. Vasudev, do you believe, do you agree with Mr. Bharat Kumar Raut that this is a pipe dream? This is poetic, but completely impossible to execute in its current form?
Yeah, but I want to just preface my observations by saying that it is really a very sad reflection on how competitive policy, populism really is shaping the economic policies. Of course, in democracy, politics has to drive economics, but there has to be some balance where if you have a situation where 95% component is politics and only 5 to 10% is economics, I think we really need to sit up and think what we are doing. Now, on coming to this particular program that has been announced, I think I would like to really analyze it from 3 standpoints: desirability, affordability, and practicality. As far as desirability is concerned, I think people can certainly argue that if you are going to have income transfers to the poorer sections of the society below poverty line, it is a good thing. But then in economics, there are no free lunches. There are always trade-offs. There are other expenditures which are also directed at the poor, whether it is bijli, pani, sadak, investment, and all those things, and education and health. They're bound to get squeezed out. And if that happens, also the world over, I think the experience of other developing countries tells us that the only antidote to poverty is growth. So for growth, it is known that you must have investment, and for investment you have savings. If we are going to use up our savings for consumption expenditure and giving doles of this type, then what is left for investment? It is going to be anti-growth in a larger sense. So the experience, we have to learn from the experience in the rest of the world how to eradicate poverty. We have not done too badly. Today the number is down to 20% when it was 40-50% of the population was below poverty line. So I think desirability, there is a question mark. In terms of affordability, I feel that when you got a scheme which is talking about 3.6 lakh crores, when your fiscal deficit is about 6.7 lakh crores,
yes,
which is almost 50% of the fiscal deficit, then what is it going to do? Fiscal deficit means that you have to borrow from the market to finance this expenditure. And if you are going to borrow from the market for consumption expenditure, what is going to create the capacity to repay those borrowings? Are you not going to squeeze out the private sector from the market by borrowing such high amounts, yes, from the market? So I think affordability is a very big problem. And practicality, I think it is so difficult to implement a scheme of this type. When you're saying that if somebody is earning 4,000 rupees, I will top it up by 2,000 rupees or 8,000 rupees. How do you identify it in an unorganized sector? And as somebody, yes, rightly said, what about pensioners? How do you do that? So there's so many questions on the practicability. All in all, I don't feel that it's a very reasonable type of a program. Maybe it's politically, it is too close to the elections. So people may be feeling that by the time people really see through the finer details, the elections would be over and maybe the electoral benefits would have been reaped or something like that. But I think it is not a very responsible scheme.
Yes, and that's an excellent that's an excellent statement about how responsible is it to make a promise like this. And I want to bring in the two politicians at this point, Mr. Zafar Islam and Charan Singh Sapra from the BJP.
Before
we do that, yes,
let me stand corrected.
Yes.
I think I made a wrong calculation or read the figures wrongly. What I was talking about the infrastructure outlay.
Yes.
Actual outlay is 28 lakh crore.
Yes.
And out of which we are spending 3.6
yes,
on this. It means 1/10, more than 1/10
yes,
will be spending only on this one scheme.
Yes.
So
again, how responsible is that? And that's the question we're asking. All right. Zafar Islam, your opening statements, and Charan Singh Sapra will respond to you. Mr. Islam, go ahead.
See, there is a proverb in English: old habit die hard and bad habit never goes. This is what Congress has attempted time and again just before the election to reap the electoral benefit, but this will not happen because it is India of not 1970s, the India of 2019, and they all understand what is the real dynamics and what exactly goes into it. So everybody is questioning how they will be able to get this money, from where they will get these resources to implement this scheme, which is actually 3.6% is 2% of GDP, which is 13% of the budget outlay, which is 58% of income tax receipt.
1.6 of GDP.
68% of the corporate tax, 58% of, yeah. So it's a large number. It's not that a small number which we are talking about. And without, I mean, I heard Mr. Salman Khurshid. I have been on channel with Mr. Charan Singh Sapra, with other senior Congress leaders. I mean, I was so amazed the way Mr. Salman Khurshid was responding. It was, I mean, they're contradicting each other. He was speaking something else. I was on CNN speaking, other spokesperson is speaking, exactly taking a different view than what Mr. Charan Sapra was taking a stand, and what Mr. Salman Khurshid. I mean, they are absolutely clueless, like Mr. Rahul Gandhi is. Today, what is important, important for all of us to realize that this kind of doles is not important. This is a country where they had come up with a Manrega scheme, which was unproductive. This doles they were distributing. We came up with modified Manrega, where this was only to create employment, where physical infrastructure.
No, actually, Mr. Islam, what is the difference between this and the 6,000 in your bank account scheme the BJP announced?
No, I'm coming to that. I'm coming to that. See, it will be very inflationary. This 72,000 what is talking about is inflationary unless you create a job and it is productively used, this money. If it is not productively used, it means that it will only increase inflation, and the entire nation will fund this scheme, not the government. And this is something which they must realize. That's why Mr. Salman Khurshid was not giving any number, because he himself was.
No. 1 second. Zafar Islam, the BJP announced that the BJP said we'll give you 6,000 rupees a month. The Congress has said you said 6,000 rupees a year, they've said 6,000 rupees a month.
No,
what is the difference, tell me, other than the fact that these are empty promises?
No. 6,000 a month, which translate to a certain number, which actually, when you see the calculation of fiscal deficit, you actually take into account, and yet the fiscal prudence, what you are maintaining, you will be able to maintain with minor adjustment. But let me tell you,
nobody wants to do the heavy lifting
number
and
which is being
the
suggested will actually. No. Let me ask two things. Let me ask very simple things. Today, what is the total budget outlay, and how much is the committed cost? How much money goes into servicing their debt? If you start borrowing more debt, means you will have additional burden for the future generation.
Mr. Zafar Islam, Mr. Zafar Islam, we just came out of a discussion where we were talking about how this government has given Jet Airways another 1,500 crore rupees with no hope of getting it back at all. So there is blame on either side. But Charan Singh Sapra, so far, let me put into a nutshell what the panel has said. It's not practical.
This is not a one time.
It's listen.
All right.
No, 1 second. Zafar Islam, 1 second.
10 seconds.
1 second.
This is not a one time cost, Faye.
1 second. To Charan Singh Sapra, Rahul Gandhi's announcement is not practical. It's not implementable. It's not responsible. It's anti-growth. And it's harmful to the country. And this has come, and I'm not counting what Zafar Islam has said. These are all independent voices who have said that. My question to you is this: is this simply mass electoral bribery? What you're saying is this: vote for me, I will give you money in your bank account every month. This is the kind of thing the Election Commission should prevent political parties from announcing. Mr. Charan Singh Sapra.
No, not at all, Faye. I don't agree with you, because Shri Rahul Gandhi has said that we have worked on all the modalities of this schemes, and we will bring in front of the public in the days to come. Now,
no, but I don't understand this. What is this secret modality that you have worked on that you're not sharing with us? I mean, Rahul Gandhi in his press conference says, if you have further questions, ask Chidambaram. Now, Mr. Chidambaram has not been reachable. You've got the entire media running around in circles looking for answers that nobody has for us. What is this? If you have the answers, announce it when you have the answers, and when Mr. Chidambaram is in town and available to answer the questions. How can you say at a press conference, ask Mr. Chidambaram, Mr. Chidambaram is not available. Everybody else says we don't know the answers, we'll tell you in a couple of days. If you don't have the answers, don't announce it for a couple of days. What is going on here? Why can't the Congress be more responsible with the kind of announcements that you make?
See, Faye, Faye, we are very responsible party and you should not be impatient. We will definitely tell the country. Let me tell you, when you rightly asked the BJP spokesperson now that when BJP is implementing that 6,000 rupees scheme, what is the difference between the two?
Actually,
I'll tell you the difference between the two and why BJP is under tremendous pressure. Because they have addressed, please don't interrupt me, let me answer. You never interrupted anybody else. Listen. So BJP has got a scheme which was only for the rural population or for the farmers, whereas Rahul Gandhi has brought in a scheme which is also for the
tell us the fiscal deficit number.
So here the BJP
calculate and tell us the fiscal deficit number.
This is a scheme. Baba, see similar apprehensions you bought in when
Manrega was being
introduced.
Bhai.
When Aadhaar was being introduced,
Okay, can I speak with Mr. Charan Singh Sapra? Mr. Sapra, I have a couple of questions for you. One second. Don't tell me about the BJP. I don't need a lecture on the BJP from the Congress representative. Mr. Sapra, here are the questions. How will the Congress identify the poor? Mr. Sapra.
Now I have all the right to interfere when Zafar Islam will talk. Do I have the right or not?
Okay, actually, let me just talk to you.
The debate is conducted on your channel. I'm sorry. You can ask me 100 questions.
Mr. Yadav, thank you. Actually, so we have a lot of questions on this channel and nobody's been able to answer them, Mr. Yadav. The questions are, how will the Congress, or how does the Congress intend to identify the poor in the country? They've said fundamentally that they believe that the ideal income for a family should be 12,000 rupees a month. Anybody making less than 12,000, the Congress will give the difference, or the government at that point will give the difference of 6, 5, 4,000, 3,000 straight into the bank account. First question, how will they identify the people who deserve this help? Second question, daily wage laborers who make 300 on one day, 200 on another day and nothing at all on the third day, how will they show proof of that income or the lack of it? How will they make sure that there is no corruption in this and there is no wide-scale leakage in the system? And finally, where will the money come from? Mr. Yadav, I've had no luck whatsoever in getting answers to any of these questions. Have you had any luck?
Faye, let me begin by saying that these are absolutely valid and vital questions, that they must be debated. And the fact that we are debating these questions is the biggest positive news of the day. We are not counting how many people died, how many terrorists died in Balakot. We are not counting the number of aeroplanes. We are debating and discussing how poverty should be addressed. And that, to my mind, is the singular contribution of this announcement. That debate on election is back to basics. This doesn't mean that Congress has answered a single question of the questions that you've asked. Let me try and say what I understand so far from public declarations, because that's the only way. I think it is not a top-up scheme in the sense that in each individual family's case, their income will not be assessed. To my mind, it's a straightforward, simple slab flat declaration scheme, which says by some mechanism, the bottom 5 crore families will be identified, the poorest, and then each of them will be given 6,000 rupees a month, 72,000 rupees a year. That's going to be this flat scheme. The question, as you correctly asked, is how do you identify, how do you target? Now, mind you, this is not the first time we are facing this problem. Ayushman Bharat, after all, is a scheme that targets the bottom 10 crore families. How do they do so? Not quite efficiently, but we are slightly better than we used to be 10 years ago in terms of targeting because of SCS, the survey that took place in 2012, the semi-census that took place. So we are slightly better, but we are not quite there. So targeting will be a problem, leakages will be a problem, corruption and misidentification is bound to be a problem, as is the case in almost all the schemes of targeting the poor in this country. This one is not going to be an exception. The two other questions we should be asking is whether this scheme will replace some of the existing schemes for the poor, for example, food subsidy, house subsidy, various other kinds of subsidies, or will it supplement? If it replaces, it is something we should be concerned about. If it supplements, then we should ask the final question, where would the money come from? The approximate cost would be 3.6 lakh crore rupees a year. Yes. It is doable. Please remember, Faye, that this is approximately 3 lakh crore rupees is approximately tax foregone for the corporate sector every year, which is to say the government says to the corporate, you owe us this much tax, but we, forego it. So yes, if you can forego this much for the corporate, for the rich, then you can probably take it out for the poor as well. But it is important that we should ask, where would these provisions be made from? Would it lead to greater taxation? If yes, the Congress should say it openly, publicly, honestly. I'm very happy that we are asking these questions. Questions that were not asked to Mr. Modi when he said 15 lakhs sabke account mein. Questions that were not asked to Mr. Modi when he said doubling of farmers' income, for which we have zero mathematics even today. Questions that were not sufficiently asked when they said 6,000 rupees to every farmer. But we ought to discuss it, we ought to interrogate, and to my mind, this interrogation and serious discussion is the very heart of democratic elections. So I'm a little happier today than I was yesterday, simply because we are debating something real and substantive.
Well, we've unfortunately set the bar in that case very, very low, Mr. Yadav, that we should be demanding more from ourselves and from the political discourse. But I'm going to take this back to Mohan Guruswamy and CM Vasudev. Mr. Vasudev, I see your hand go up. Do you want to respond to Yogendra Yadav that this is doable and hence it is something we should be considering? Mr. Vasudev first.
No, it's certainly a good thing that we are discussing, but as long as it was a proposal on the table for discussion, but here something has been announced, so it is a little different from discussing a proposal in that sense. No, I was trying to say that when somebody was trying to compare the scheme which the government has announced with regard to the small and marginal farmers, that 6,000 rupees scheme, and what is the comparison between the two? I think that scheme is, directed at small and marginal farmers who are easily identifiable, whose names are there in the land records. And to my mind, the idea of that scheme is that small and marginal farming in India has become unviable. And therefore, this little amount of money can shore up the viability of farming by the small and marginal farmers.
Marginal farmers don't have land.
And that viability has been affected.
What about landless farmers? The really poor farmers are the ones who don't have land.
You need to cover.
They get nothing.
Yeah,
that is where the subsidies
there should be some mechanism to try to.
Yes, Mr. Vasudev.
Sorry. No, I was saying that in the agriculture sector, the real problem is arising out of the fact that we've got 60% population dependent on agriculture, which is today contributing to only 17% or so to the GDP. So this is certainly not sustainable that 60% people are dependent on something which is contributing only 17% of the GDP. So this is basically an unviable operation, especially for the small and marginal farmers.
Okay.
So therefore, anything which can be done to shore up the viability of these farmers, welcome.
Okay. Coming back to the scheme announced today.
Comparable with this type of a minimum income support. This is a totally different concept.
Yes, coming back to the scheme, Mohan Guruswamy, please. Mohan Guruswamy, do you agree with Yogendra Yadav that this is doable and we should consider it?
Of course it's doable. If any government sets up its mind to do something which is laudable like this, it's doable. But, consider this fact that we spend 11.4% of our GDP on salaries for government employees. 23 million people who are employed by the state at all levels account for 11.4% of GDP. And it's quite rich that, my friend Vasudev, who we worked together, says that, it's unaffordable. When 23% wage increase was announced by Jet Li, he said, consider it a pump priming for the economy. These guys will get more salaries, they'll go and buy more refrigerators, more cars, is good for the economy. Now, I think by using that same logic, if you put 5 million families, you give them 72,000 crores, 72,000 rupees a year. Not all will get 72,000, some might get less. So I've got a figure of about 1.6% of GDP on this. Then, consider it pump priming. They'll buy more soap, they'll buy this and that, and it will give a boost to the economy. When you give government employees, who are the highest paid income earners in this country, you give them a wage increase of 23%, then you say that, this is too much. I find that very rich. And, tax foregone is not 3.6 lakh crores. Tax foregone, the exemptions given to corporations is almost 6 lakh crores. I think you can get some of that money back. Rich people also get lots of exemptions. They don't pay taxes, a lot of leakages. Collect more taxes. Set more targets to the income tax departments. And, go chasing after them. I think tax, we under-collect by almost 50 to 60%. So you collect that money. So you get a more efficient government, more streamlined government. And as far as identifying poor people, we have enough records in the country to identify poor people. We've been giving subsidized rations, we've been giving all kinds of subsidies to poor people for housing, all kinds of things for a long time. We have enough data there. Now, the question is, how do you figure whether a man is getting 6,000 rupees and therefore is entitled only to 6,000 rupees? Or how is he going to get, whatever amount? That is something else which has to be worked out. And I'm sure with Aadhaar and all the modern systems we have now, we'll be able to work it out. It might take time, but we'll be able to work it out. But doesn't mean you don't try it. Don't give it away like, give away like you did for Manrega. You should work hard on this. You should decentralize government and do it. Maybe
there's
this
no
will
reason
lead
why
to
we
some
shouldn't
reform
try.
in government.
Okay,
But
Charan Singh
to say
Sapra.
it can't be done, it shouldn't be done, I don't agree with that.
One second. Charan Singh Sapra, do you have an answer to how these people will be identified? Yeah. And if it will be a flat transfer, not income linked?
Yeah, see, like Mr. Guru Swami gave a couple of examples that various schemes have been continuing, and also the Ayushman Bharat scheme, they have identified people. Likewise, let me bring to the state level where we have a lot of pension yojnas. Now, in these pension yojnas, whether that is the Sanjay Gandhi Pension Yojana or maybe Pradhan Mantri Pension Yojana, they have already formulated a pattern where the people have been identified. Now, people, when they have been already identified, the same parameters can be used for this scheme. So, I feel where there is will, there is way. We have a will to do. We had a will to bring in Manrega or land acquisition.
Is this the actual modality of the scheme, or are you guessing here, Mr. Sapra?
We'll get it.
Is this the actual modality of the scheme, or are you just
No, I'm not guessing.
giving us an example?
I'm giving you the names also. Yes, I'm saying. No, I'm not giving an example. As far as the identification is concerned, the state governments as well as the central government agencies have already identified a big chunk of poor people. They have been identified under various pension schemes, under the Ayushman Bharat scheme or various other schemes. So similar parameters, it's not a job which we have to start from zero, from ABCD. It is a job which has already been done.
Do you agree that the identification has already been done and we have enough data?
80% identification has
I'm
been done.
saying that even if identification has been done, it should come before the public. It should come before the people. What I'm asking Charan Singh Sapra, is a good friend of mine, is that if this announcement had come from anybody else, I would not have taken it seriously. But since it comes from the probable prime ministerial candidate of the nation, then one has to take it seriously. If he makes this type of announcement like Gareebi Hatao announcement of Indira Gandhi, if he does this now, then it has to be coupled with this scheme.
Yes.
Some details. Nothing has come, and how does he think that people have to keep waiting and then you are...
No, but as a senior...
Pidambaram doesn't meet you. What does that mean?
Do you believe that this is irresponsible?
Has he left it to Charan Singh Sapra and like people to explain and defend him on the screen of the television?
No, and if Charan Singh Sapra is going to come and give us the information at 9 o'clock, why didn't Rahul Gandhi announce it in the evening when he announced it?
Why is he shying away? Or does he have a scheme? Or it was just he has shoot his mouth out? But I am not ready to believe that, because he is the contender for Prime Minister's post.
He has to take this more seriously.
He has to take it seriously. At least we have to take, as Indians, we have to take him more seriously than what it behaves like.
I agree with you. One second. I just want to, okay, very quickly, Zafar Islam, very quickly, please. I've almost run out of time. Go ahead.
Yeah. No.
See, I'm not overly concerned at this point. At this point of time, I'm not overly concerned about whether they will be able to identify or not identify. Let's assume for a moment that yes, they will be able to identify the poor. But more concerned about the statement made by Congress spokesperson and Mr. Salman Khurshid, that Mr. Salman Khurshid said that we will ensure that some of the expenditure will be reduced. So basically they are saying the revenue expenditure will be curtailed. I don't know how much headroom we have.
Actually, he didn't say that at all.
Let me make it clear.
No, actually, Mr. Islam, he didn't say that. He actually said it's unfair to ask me if we will make cuts because we are not in a position to answer that question. I just want to give the final word to Yogendra Yadav. Mr. Yadav, specifically to do with identifying the poor at this point. And most of our poor are rural poor. We have urban poor. They might be easier to identify, rural poor. And to make sure that they get the money, let's hypothetically assume that what we've been told in patches so far is true. Are you convinced with what you've heard so far that we have enough data in the system and it can be useful?
Faye, we need more details. Faye, we need more details. You are absolutely right to demand more than we know. When Mr. Rahul Gandhi announced it first time towards the end of January, there was not even a figure there. Today we have a figure, we don't have mechanism. We should demand it, and that's what elections are all about. To my mind, in terms of moral justification, this kind of a scheme is certainly morally more justified, as Mr. Mohan Guruswamy pointed out. More than 7th pay commission to government salaries, to employees. It is more justified than the scheme for farmers because it actually did not address the landless in terms of its practicability, in terms of identification. Identification will happen. It can happen because there are a large number of schemes where identification is happening. It will be imperfect, like all schemes are. Most economists have pointed out that targeting and identification of poor has been very uneven in this country. So this may be one of those schemes. It is not impossible, but it may not be quite accurate. Is it something we should look at, cash transfers? Remember, this is an idea which has been discussed by very serious economists for the last 10 years. Including our own chief economic advisor, Arvind Subramanian. These are very serious ideas. So we should have more debate. And yes, we should demand more details from the Congress party.
Very quick yes or no answer, because we've almost run out of time. Do you believe this will help the Congress in the elections?
Perhaps yes. Because this is the way, again I'm saying this is a Chunavi Jumla. And if it is Chunavi Jumla, it works. But it is a non-starter. We will be fooling people. Another thing, more serious issue is that if this type of word goes, then you are actually helping, encouraging a rift between poor and non-poor.
Yes. Because people will resent this sort of...
It is like to distort our social and cultural fabric. I am more concerned about that.
Okay, Yogendra Yadav seems to disagree, but while we've run out of time, it's simply going to boil down to this. While the Congress has announced today its NYAY scheme, a scheme that will provide to people a minimum income of 12,000 rupees a month. So what this means basically, and the minimum income guarantee, like our panel was pointing out, has been studied by very senior economists. The idea is that you believe that a family needs to have a certain amount of money in order to live in dignity, which means not to starve to death, to be able to afford food, to be able to afford clothes, and to be able to afford human dignity. And if you give a family that money, that they will then be able to feed themselves. And so nobody's starving in the country, and then they can start to fight and to work for higher things. While this is a noble, noble thought, the Congress party has given us zero details as to how they will make this happen. How will you identify these people? How will you make sure that the money is reaching the right people? Will you check on someone's income? If you're checking on someone's income, what data are you using to check on that income? Someone who works as a daily wage laborer will make a certain amount of money one month and none at all on the other. If you're going to say people who make more than 12,000 rupees a month will not qualify, how will you check that and how will you verify it? How will you make sure that this plan, like all of your other schemes, doesn't leak and there is no corruption in it? And finally, where will the money come from? Without giving us these answers, it is irresponsible to make the announcement, because the economists in the country and the experts in the country cannot assess your plan. And they cannot educate the voters on to whether or not it is a good plan, or a doable plan, or a responsible plan, good for the country and good for the citizens. To announce something today and say we will give you the details 5 days from now is not very convincing. Give us the details now. Until then, it's just a poll promise that we shouldn't take seriously. Thanks for watching.